My name is Cal Brennan. I'm 41 years old. I live in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in a house I bought 12 years ago with money I saved from 6 years of fieldwork, 4 of which were spent on a bridge reconstruction project in western Kentucky that ran 2 years over schedule and changed the way I think about almost everything. The house needs painting on the north side. The garage door sticks in cold weather. I keep meaning to fix both and never quite get around to it, which is a specific kind of irony for a man in my line of work. I'm a structural engineer. I've been doing it since I was 24, though if you met me at a gas station, you probably wouldn't guess that. I don't carry myself the way people expect engineers to carry themselves. I spent the first 6 years of my career in the field, which means I wore the same clothes as the ironworkers and the concrete crews, ate lunch on the same tailgates, and learned to read a structure by putting my hands on it rather than trusting it to look right on paper. Some of that never washes off. The clothes, the posture, the habit of looking at ceilings and overpasses the way other people look at paintings. I run a small firm now. 4 engineers, 2 drafters, an office manager named Patricia who has been with me since the beginning and makes better coffee than anyone I have ever met. We do bridge work mostly. Inspection, rehabilitation, the occasional new build. We are not a flashy operation. We don't have a lobby with a waterfall feature or a company SUV with a logo on the door. We have a converted row house on State Street and a reputation that took 15 years to build. And that reputation is the only business card I have ever needed. The trip to Oslo was the first international project I had agreed to take in 3 years. A Norwegian firm called Halvorsen Infrastructure had been rebuilding a pedestrian and light rail bridge over a fjord inlet outside Bergen, and they had run into a specific problem with the expansion joint system that nobody on their team had been able to resolve without starting over. Someone had given them my name. They had called 4 times across 2 months before I agreed to a video consultation. After that call, they asked me to come in person. I said I'd think about it. Then I said yes, because the problem was genuinely interesting, and because Patricia told me I needed to leave the country for at least a week before I became completely insufferable. So on a Tuesday in November, I drove to Philadelphia International, checked my 1 duffel bag, and found my gate. I was not in a hurry. I had a book, a notebook, and a thermos of coffee from the place on Walnut Street that still makes it the way I like it. Strong enough to offend people who are polite about coffee. I found a seat near the window, set my bag down, and opened the book. The gate was busy. A delayed flight had stacked up passengers from 2 different boards, and the seating area was full in the particular tense way airports get when everyone is waiting for the same information and nobody has it yet. I watched the gate agents for a while, the way I always do in crowds, not because I'm anxious, but because I find it interesting to watch people manage systems under pressure. That's when she sat down across from me. She was probably 38. Sharp suit, the kind that signals she had worn a lot of suits and stopped noticing them. A rolling carry-on that probably cost more than my first car. Hair pulled back with the efficiency of someone who didn't have time to think about it. She was on her phone when she sat down, then off it quickly. And then she looked around the gate the way people do when they've just arrived somewhere and are assessing the situation. Her eyes landed on me briefly, moved away, came back. I was aware of what she was seeing. Flannel shirt, worn but clean. Work boots I had kept for 10 years because they fit correctly, and I am not sentimental about anything except footwear and structural tolerances. A duffel bag with a strap that had been repaired with a different color of webbing because the original broke, and I fixed it rather than replaced it. A paperback with a creased spine. Hands that, no matter what I do, still carry the ghost of fieldwork in the knuckle lines. She watched me for a moment, in the way people sometimes do when they have decided something about you and are now looking for confirmation. Then she leaned slightly forward. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was pleasant, confident, the voice of a person accustomed to initiating things. "Are you on the Oslo flight?" "Yes," I said. She nodded, glancing at my boarding pass, which I had set on the seat beside me. Economy, row 34, seat E. "I have companion upgrades," she said. "Business class. I always end up with extras and they just expire." She smiled with the particular warmth of someone doing something generous that also costs them very little. "You're welcome to one, if you'd like. You look like you could use the extra legroom." I looked at her for a moment. She was being kind, in the way that people are kind when they have decided someone needs their kindness. I recognized the look. I had been on the receiving end of it many times over the years, at restaurants, at client meetings, at job sites where the owner's representative was expecting someone who looked different. "That's generous," I said. "Thank you." She looked pleased in the way of someone whose offer has been accepted correctly. She made a brief gesture to the gate agent, exchanged a few words I couldn't hear, and returned with a new boarding pass. "All set? 4A. You're by the window." I thanked her again. She settled back into her seat and went back to her phone. We boarded separately. She was already in 4B when I found 4A, settling in with the ease of someone who knew exactly where everything was. She watched me put the duffel in the overhead, with the mild supervisory attention of someone who was half expecting to need to help. I didn't need help. We took off at 7:15. The cabin quieted. She ordered wine. I ordered water and kept the coffee thermos on the tray table. She glanced at it. "Long trip," she said, in the friendly way of someone filling silence. 8 hours, I agreed. "Business or personal?" "Business." She nodded, interested in a polite way. "What do you do?" It is the question that has defined most of the interesting conversations of my life, because the answer is always a test I don't administer on purpose. "Structural engineering," I said. "Bridge work mostly." She blinked once. The micro-adjustment that happens when someone's mental image doesn't match the new information. "Oh," she said. And then, to her credit, she didn't try to cover it. She just sat with it for a moment. "I assumed construction." "That's fair," I said. "I spent a lot of years in construction before I moved to the design side. I still prefer field clothes." She smiled, a little differently than before, less managed. "What are you going to Oslo for?" "Bergen, technically. There's a bridge with an expansion joint problem that's been holding up a rehabilitation project for about 8 months. They want someone to look at it." She turned slightly in her seat. "You consult internationally?" "Occasionally, when the problem is interesting enough." "What makes this one interesting?" I thought about how to answer that in a way that wasn't a 40-minute lecture. The joint system they installed was designed for a different thermal range than the site actually experiences. It's not wrong exactly. It's just wrong for that specific place. So every solution they've tried has been technically correct and practically insufficient. It's the kind of problem that looks like an engineering failure, but is actually a failure of attention. She was quiet for a moment. "A failure of attention," she repeated slowly. "To context," I said. "The specs were met. The materials were right. Nobody paid close enough attention to what the site was actually telling them." She looked at me. "I think I've had that problem in boardrooms," she said. "Not with bridges." "Most problems are the same problem in different materials." She laughed. "A real one, not the polite kind." "I'm Claire," she said, and held out her hand. "Cal," I said, and shook it. She told me she ran an investment advisory firm with offices in Philadelphia and London. She was going to Oslo for a meeting with a sovereign wealth fund about infrastructure bond portfolios. She had been doing this work for 12 years and was, by any measurable standard, very good at it. What she did not say, but what became apparent over the next 2 hours, was that she was used to being the most informed person in a room. Not arrogantly so. She was too smart for arrogance. But there is a particular way that people carry expertise when they have carried it long enough. A slight forward lean when they speak, an expectation that the explanation will be received rather than exchanged. I recognized it because I had learned to watch for it in myself and correct it. We talked about infrastructure finance for a while, which I knew something about from the funding side of projects, and then she asked me about the bridge in Bergen more specifically, and I explained the expansion joint problem in more detail. And I could tell from the way she listened, really listened, not just waited, that she was genuinely interested and not simply being polite. Around the 3rd hour, somewhere over the Atlantic, she said something that surprised me. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. When I offered you the upgrade at the gate..." She paused. "I was making an assumption. I know that now. I want to make sure I'm being honest about it." I looked at her. "You were being kind." "I was being condescending," she said. "There's a difference, and I know the difference. I looked at what you were wearing, and I decided you needed help that I could provide." She turned her wineglass slightly on the tray table. "That's not generosity. That's a category error dressed up as generosity." I didn't say anything for a moment. The honest version, she continued, would have been offering the upgrade to someone and not running a background check on their shirt first. Most people don't catch that distinction, I said. Most people aren't sitting next to someone who just explained the difference between a technical failure and a failure of attention. She looked at me. I think I had a failure of attention at the gate. I thought about all the times that failure had been aimed at me. The contractor who assumed I was the site labor until I showed up with the structural drawings. The client who kept addressing questions to my younger colleague because my colleague was wearing a tie. The hotel conference room where the catering staff asked if I was there to fix the projector. It's common, I said. I stopped being bothered by it a long time ago. Did you? Mostly, I said honestly. It used to make me want to explain myself. Now I just wait. People usually figure it out. She nodded slowly. And if they don't? Then they weren't going to anyway. We landed in Oslo at 8 in the morning, local time. The airport was clean and quiet in the Northern European way, all pale wood and calm signage. We walked toward baggage claim together without either of us deciding to. At the carousel, she said, I have a meeting Wednesday morning, but I'm in Bergen Thursday. The firm has a client site visit near Flesland. She paused. Would it be strange to ask if we could get coffee? Near the bridge, if that's not inconvenient. I looked at her. She was not performing the question. She was asking it. It wouldn't be strange, I said. My luggage came first, the single duffel, the same one from the gate. She watched it come around on the carousel, and I could see her doing the mental accounting of what it meant about the kind of man who packed for an international consulting engagement in one bag and traveled in the same flannel shirt he wore to work on a Tuesday. One bag, she said. I'm only there a week. I have 4 bags for 5 days. Different requirements, I said. She smiled. Or different relationship with what's required. I didn't argue with that. Outside the terminal, the November air came in cold and clean, the kind of cold that has no ambiguity about it, and I stood there for a moment with the duffel on my shoulder while she arranged her car service. Before she got in, she turned back. Cal, she said it the way people say a name when they're checking that they have it right. Thank you for not making me feel worse about the gate than I already did. You did that yourself, I said. I didn't need to add anything. She looked at me for a moment with the expression of someone who is filing something away carefully. I'll see you Thursday, she said. The car pulled away. I found my own car, a modest rental I had booked myself. No driver, no service, which was how I preferred it, and drove north toward Bergen through a landscape of cold water and granite that looked exactly like a place where bridges were serious business. I thought about the gate, the upgrade, the moment she had looked at my boarding pass and made her decision about who I was and what I needed. I thought about all the years of that, of being assessed by surfaces, and found to be something that required assistance. And I thought about the 3 hours at 37,000 feet, when the surfaces had dissolved the way they always do when 2 people are actually talking, and what had been left was just a woman who was honest enough to name her own mistake, and a man who had spent 15 years learning that the most important thing about any structure is what it's actually standing on, not what it looks like from the road. Thursday came gray and cold. The bridge was exactly the problem I had been told it was. Beautiful design, good materials, insufficient attention to the specific character of the site. I spent 4 hours on it with the Halverson team, getting my boots muddy on the embankment, taking measurements by hand because I trust my hands, making notes in the same way I always have, in a small notebook with a mechanical pencil because I am old enough not to apologize for my habits. Claire was there at noon. She came from the Flesland meeting in a car with 2 colleagues, and she stood at the edge of the access road looking at the bridge with the focused expression she had worn on the plane when I was explaining the joint problem. Her colleagues were already checking their phones. She was looking at the bridge. She walked over to where I was standing at the base of the east embankment. Is it fixable? She asked. Everything's fixable, I said. The question is always whether the fix is worth the cost. And this one? I looked up at the joint line where the deck met the approach span, where 8 months of the wrong solution had left a faint shadow of stress on the concrete surface that most people would have walked right over. This one, I said, just needed someone to pay attention to what it was actually saying. She looked at me sideways. "You're not only talking about the bridge." "I'm always talking about the bridge," I said, "but sometimes the bridge is useful for other things." She bought the coffee. We stood on the access road with the fjord behind us and the cold coming off the water and talked for an hour about infrastructure and capital and the gap between what things are built to withstand and what they actually face. She was sharp, prepared. She had read the project summary on the flight from Oslo and had questions I didn't expect. Before she left, she asked for my card. I gave her the one Patricia insists I carry, even though I never remember to. She looked at it. Brennan Structural Engineering, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. She looked up. "You flew economy to a consulting engagement in Norway?" "I fly economy unless someone upgrades me," I said. She smiled. The real kind. The one that had taken 3 hours at altitude to get to. "I hope I didn't make you feel small at that gate," she said. "You made me feel like a man in a flannel shirt," I said. "Which is what I am. I don't need the assessment to change for that to be enough." She was quiet for a moment. The fjord moved behind her, gray and deep and entirely unconcerned with any of this. "That might be the most confident thing anyone has ever said to me," she said. "I've had some practice," I said. If this story said something to you, if you've ever been sized up in a waiting room, a lobby, a gate, a meeting, leave a comment. I read every single one. And if you know someone who does honest work and carries it quietly, share this with them. They deserve to hear it. See you in the next one.